Welcome to Colts Beer, the podcast where football fever meets cold beer. Here we talk all things Indianapolis Colts, from epic touchdowns to close games to the hottest NFL rumors. Sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and let's tackle the next quarter together. Go Colts!
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Colts Beer, episode 22. Obviously, no Colts game last weekend, but we saw some great Indiana football last night. We will talk about that today, I think, too. First of all, my beer today is this Budweiser from the Czech Republic. I just love that one. Today we have like our fourth cast member, Ulrich, with us again, and our special guest, Kevin Bowen. Kevin, would you like to say a word about yourself?
Well, yes, good afternoon from the States here. And I apologize for not having my beer ready. This is what I have. I have a little milk for a little formula here for our 9-week-old child. So apologies on that front here, but great to be back with you guys. Thanks for having me again. And like I said, the last time I hopped on with you, beer and football doesn't get much better than that, and podcasting. So three of my favorite things right here.
Awesome.
Oh, it's me. Yeah. Thanks for having me again. Jumping in for Christoph. My beer of the day is a Hirte. It's an Austrian private brewery. It's a Pils. So, yeah, obviously no Colts game, but congrats to the Indiana Hoosiers. Hoosiers. Cheers.
Nicely done.
I'm glad you did that because I was going to make a mess of that. Great to have you on again, Kevin. Today I've got Le Trappe. It's a blonde beer, Belgian style, but it's from the Netherlands. So yeah, cheers, guys.
Is it still from your calendar, or you bought that one?
Yeah, still working my way through the calendar. I'm supposed to be doing dry January, so I'm not getting very far into it. It's only when we do this.
So, yeah, I think, first of all, we're going into, Kevin, when we have you here, we just would go into that season-ending recap again. With you, probably some insights on how people from Indiana saw that. Especially, we talked about 2 weeks ago, obviously, about the decisions going on with Shane and Chris Ballard. Most of us were pretty surprised this happened. Or how was Indy? How was people in Indy seeing this?
Yeah, I think the surprise nature probably comes from just the strictly black and white resume results. When you look at, Chris, for example, 9 years into it, I guess Shane 3, but, when you look at those resumes, especially as you've seen now the NFL cycle play out, whether it's Buffalo, whether it's Baltimore, whether it's the debate in Green Bay, obviously there's much more success in all of those places than what you've had here in Indy. So it's very fair surprise, when it's kind of met at that. But, for those that were kind of following along, I guess from my point of view, whether it was my podcast or our, morning show here in Indianapolis, I just never got the impression that this was going to be immense change. And, I think in hearing Carly Gordon talk, it really sounds like once they got, to that start, and I think the trade for Sauce Gardner, that there wasn't really going to be anything, I guess, that would have changed her mind. I'm putting a little bit of words in her mouth with that, but I really think at that point she felt like they had reached a level that was acceptable in her eyes to say, all right, no matter what happens here down the stretch, we'll continue to, operate in this manner here. So, she obviously said that, hey, yeah, with about a week ago in the season, or left in the season, that's when we decided, to retain everybody. But I don't get the impression, had she known John Harbaugh and Sean McDermott and Mike Tomlin were available, I don't think that would have changed her mind. I think she was very gung-ho about the first 2 months of the year. I think the Sauce Gardner trade and just doing that trade was a positive in her eyes as well. And that's where we're at here, as we reach kind of the latter stages of January.
Kevin, do you think we're in a kind of I don't know how unique a situation this is around the league, but now we have Ballard entering. This is his final year of his contract, right? So he's in a contract year effectively for a GM. Do you think that? Because I guess on the flip side of it, this winning is more important than it's ever been, sort of thing. Obviously, that kind of lends you to thinking, right, well, we need to be quite aggressive from a GM perspective. Free agencies maybe going to be aggressive. But then you also, on the flip side, have the fact that, Chris Ballard might not be here after a year. Are we in a bit of a weird situation where he might be kind of handcuffed a little bit in what he wants to do or what he would normally do, knowing that he may not be here in 12 months?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. This kind of gets back to the Gardner trade for me, if we can go back there for a second, because I do think it was a really big deal in retaining, Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. I think there are points and times in a franchise, and it's very difficult, I think, to kind of maneuver your way through these times where you've earned the right to make those moves, or you've earned the right to, not be able to make those moves. And I think that's where ownership has to step in, because, when you make a trade of that magnitude for Sauce Gardner, you are committing to Daniel Jones for, just to throw out a number, probably 2 to 3 years. You are committing to your regime as well for, we'll see how much longer. It's not just you're trading for a 25-year-old former All-Pro corner, top 5 pick on a very manageable contract. Again, I'm not evaluating Sauce Gardner on, the injuries that he had once he came here. He's a really, really quality player. But there's more to the trade than just him. And, I go back to at times, I remember like Green Bay, for example, they were kind of in the mix for Jonathan Taylor a few off seasons ago, or at least trying to trade for him. But they realized at the time, hey, we can't afford to give up a first round pick because we don't know if Jordan Love is the guy. And again, some franchises, you've earned the right to be able to do a trade like that. You're in a position of stability, whether that's at quarterback, whether that's in your front office, to where those risks, those trades can occur. And for me, that's where I think if you're Carly Gordon, as enticing as it is to go out there and get a Sauce Gardner, there are too many other tentacles to that trade that I just don't think were maybe fully explored or, really, really, vetted. And again, I understand Sauce Gardner is not readily available every week. The trade deadline is obviously, in early November. So it's not like it's something that just grows on trees. But to me, as a franchise, quarterback stability, front office success, some level of that has to be there before you're able to make a trade where now you can't even entertain really quarterback in a serious manner here over the next couple of off seasons. And I get people that say, hey, if you're going to bring in a new GM right now, what a disservice it would be to introduce that person without 2 first-round picks each of the next 2 years. So I guess I start there. And then Sam, to answer the question, yeah, I mean, there's part of me that thinks, yeah, if I were a desperate GM, I would want to do a lot of things to try and, get the results in 2026 as quick as possible and maybe risk some things, 2027, 2028, and not really think about that long term. Now, I don't really know resource-wise what they could possibly do, to be honest with you. I mean, I guess you continue to trade draft picks, but you've already traded your first rounder. And then if you look at the free agency money right now from a cap space standpoint, such a big chunk is going to go to Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce. You would think that, again, I don't really know how much you can do financially to, go down that path. I'll be curious how the next couple months unfold. But again, I get the question, but I don't know, given the state of the franchise, if they're in a position to have all of these resources available and then let's just turn them all into short-term answers versus trying to, play a little bit more of the long-term game if I were a 1 or 2 year GM.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of crossed my mind that after it was pretty much confirmed, like I felt like the week before the game, the last game of the season, it felt like it was fairly confirmed that Ballard and co were going to be back. I think from that point on, I was thinking maybe Carly's approaching this as like she's effectively doubling down on on the Source trade, on Ballard, on Shane, and saying, you know what? We saw it as a 2. I think everyone, when the Source trade happened, everyone was talking about a 2-year Super Bowl window. When you're looking at the vets that we've got, they were all kind of, they're all for next season. Then after that, there's a lot of guys out of contract. So the positive Colts fan in me is thinking that maybe Carly's looking at this and there's going to be more gambles kind of heading into this year. Like you said, I don't know what we could gamble with. Ballard likes his picks, so I don't think he's going to start wanting to give away 2s and 3s when he's already got no 1s. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how aggressive Ballard is and can be this offseason.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Sam, and it is kind of a double down on not only the trade, but in general, I think the first 2 months of the season. Mm-hmm. And, the hope there obviously is you stay healthy. You get Daniel Jones, not only back on the field, but back to being a movable quarterback to where he really was thriving early in the season. I think that is kind of what you are trying to double down on. And, at that point of the year, obviously Jonathan Taylor was running the football very effectively. I think Tyler Warren benefited from, more of that Daniel Jones movement. Defensively, I don't think we ever really probably saw what they exactly envisioned per se, and again, there are some questions there now with, where's Travaris Ward's situation going into next year? Where's DeForest Buckner off of the neck? Those are probably 2 of the bigger questions there. Obviously Jones's Achilles, you kind of put into a different group there. So, the question I kept on coming back to throughout December when we debated what was going to happen, it was how would Carly view this? Technically she is a first-year owner, if you want to call her that. Obviously she's been heavily involved in the organization, but as far as making those decisions, it's year 1 for her. And so the thought to me was, did everybody's slate get wiped clean when you took over, or are we still evaluating 8 years of Ballard before this past season, the first 2 years of Steichen? And I think we got our answer. Ultimately it came down to those first 2 months really of the season, and believing that could be a little bit more the case. There is a little bit of me that I do, am a little curious, would Payne, another scouting staff, another GM, you mentioned 1 year left on Ballard's deal. I believe it's 3 more for Steichen. Just the financial ramifications of that. Is that something that was at play here? I asked her that in the press conference. She very quickly, kind of said, no, that was not, I paraphrase here. I think she said something to the effect of, we'll do whatever it takes to win. But that was a thought that I had as well.
I think it goes back. I mean, the Sauce trade was the day we knew, if they need a new GM or head coach, it would be a tough situation because, as you said, giving up 2 first-round picks and then all these veterans who signed the following year, the 2026 season. So it goes back to when we thought AR is the guy. So we tied all the contracts to AR's rookie contract. So I think that comes a little bit into play too from my taste. I always thought nothing will happen this season because next year you can ship off, if you will, a lot of contracts really easily because they are running out. So yeah, probably that's the thinking behind it too. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that's at play. Again, that's something that she mentioned specifically, but I think you're inferring it, pretty well. And, again, this kind of comes back to where I think Carly Ursay-Gordon, I think, is and will continue to do a great job of not being heavily involved in, the day-to-day scouting decisions, free agent signings, coaching decisions. I think she walks a really fine line well in that she wants to absorb as much information as possible. She's going to be very present in soaking in and being a sponge to all of that, but she's not going to sit there and say, no, we're drafting whatever. I liked, Fernando Mendoza because, we're a big IU family and we're going to trade our next, 5 first-round picks to go up and get him. She's not going to insert herself to that degree. But in terms of the Gardner trade, when the domino effect off of that impacts your franchise quarterback and impacts, in my opinion, the GM and the head coach and their futures. That's when I do think she, as the owner, has to step in. Because for Chris Ballard, if you're Ballard, think about that. And if you're trying to continue to be the GM of the Colts, if you know doing a trade like that, just doing the trade is going to help you maintain your job, not evaluating any results of the trade, you're going to be more inclined to do the trade. You know, I mean, we all would probably do that for our respective jobs if we know it's going to help us, you know, advance, you know, our own careers there. And again, quarterback with Daniel Jones too. It's that certainly the 2 months of success was great, but you know, again, unfortunately, his career has been really defined by the lack of availability or, you know, level of play over the course of an entire NFL season. And that reality, I don't think can be overlooked either. And now, you know, that was obviously pre-Achilles injury, and you're kind of back in the same boat here. So I do think there was some of that, Ulrich. You know, when you go back to why Ballard is even, you know, afforded whatever, an 7th year, I guess it was, back in 2022, when they brought him back after the Jeff Saturday, Frank Reich season. Basically, they committed to this Richardson window. We're going to draft a young quarterback. We're going to hire a first-time head coach. There will be growing pains. We're going to need to be a little patient. So now 23 happens, 24 happens. Obviously, we just finished 25. That window with Richardson looks to be all but shut, of course. But now it's almost like, well, that window is now pivoted into a new window where it's the Daniel Jones, Sauce Gardner, however you want to label this new window. And Ballard is still going to get another chance, which, you know, again, some people would agree with. Some, probably most Colts fans would disagree with. But that's kind of how I view where the state of the roster or where the state of the franchise is right now.
When you said Carly is like a sponge, we have Marcel with us. Marcel's nickname actually is Sponge. And he also
I'll
said
have to alert Carly Ursay Gordon that she has another sponge here in Marcel.
He's actually asking us a question for the future. What should we do with Pitt and Pierce? I mean, for me, it's like Pierce, sign that man, give him whatever he wants. And Pitt, I would love to see him in the Colts jersey in future. But could Pitt be a really hard decision this offseason? Probably trade him. What do you guys all think?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Andres, I probably agree with a lot of what you just kind of laid out there. Alec Pierce has the hardest trade to find in an NFL league that continues to try and limit big plays, opposing defenses. We've seen that grow and grow here over the last handful of years, especially. Pierce continues to be a consistent home run hitter. He has such a special weapon in getting open, making contested catches, drawing penalties. You know, at times I think we overlook, even in that Houston game, the last game of the season before he got just the dumbest ejection I've ever seen in my life. You know, he drew another penalty in that game. I mean, those are 30-yard plays that he's able to muster up. So to me, when I look at Pierce, he's a must resign. I could even get into a debate. He's just as important of a resign as Daniel Jones, which I know is crazy to say that about a quarterback when you compare a quarterback to a wideout, but I view Pierce in that light. You know, he's been very durable throughout his career outside of the concussions. I think you can't lose sight of that. And, you know, he rounded out his route tree, I thought, really well this season. You know, go back to the back shoulder play he made in Seattle. You know, for those that did watch the College Football National Championship last night, several of the biggest plays in the game from Indiana were back shoulder plays. Fourth downs, third downs, you know, guys that used to catch go balls. Now teams take that away. Okay, can you, again, show a little bit more? And I thought Pierce had that. So, you know, franchise tag is $28 million for the wideout. I would not be afraid to slap that on him. And I think the market would be much more competitive than people think. Last April, I believe the Colts turned down a second-round pick for Pierce. And again, this was last April. So, you know, look at what he just did over the last 4 months. So now Pittman's cap hit, I believe, is $29 million. I like Michael Pittman Jr. a lot. I think he brings a really important presence to the wide receiver position, but $29 million is too rich. So you got to do something with that. Kind of gets back to what Sam was asking a little bit earlier of, to make everything work, even if you just want to do Ballard's plan. Ballard has kind of said, got to get younger and faster defensively. If you just want to kind of add a defensive end opposite Latu, find a new starting linebacker, even to execute that, I almost feel like Pittman's cap hit has to come down. But if you were to trade him or cut him, wide receiver becomes a need right away. I love Ashton Doolin, but I don't want Ashton Doolin playing 60 snaps a game. I just think it's unfair to him offensively. Josh Downs more of a slot guy. This is where kind of the AD Mitchell, trade comes into play a little bit here. So back on a restructure is probably where I would go with that thought there. But Pierce to me is just he is a must to bring back. And if you're nervous about the open market and giving him a contract and what that could look like, fine. Do the franchise tag thing and worry about it in, 12 months from now.
Yeah, I think I saw some news that the Colts reached out to Pittman already, that they want to restructure his contract.
Pittman, I think he was pretty resigned after the end of the season. I think Pittman gets it. He's the son of an NFL player. He understands the business side. And let's be honest, he wanted to get that third contract. For business purposes, remember, he only signed that 3-year deal, a couple of years ago when they put the tag on him, thinking I'm going to hit the open market or I'm going to hit free agency one more time, in my prime.
Yeah.
So he knows it. He gets it. But I mean, him and his wife love the Indianapolis area. For those that aren't totally plugged in, I mean, they have a massive property and farm here, just north of the complex. So this is not a California kid that I think is just looking to leave, I guess is why I bring all of that up here. But if you are letting him go for whatever reason, I mean, now we all of a sudden get into a wide receiver debate on how high on the need list that becomes. So I don't think you want to play that game just yet. I get the draft, has more wideouts and all of that, but if you're trying to get younger and faster on defense, you got to think a lot of draft picks got to go to that side of the ball.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at with Pitt. I think, absolutely love the guy. I think he brings that kind of attitude and energy that you need at wide receiver. I think we've over the years had quite a lot of nice players at wide receiver. I think you need that guy who's a brawler type like Pittman,
Right.
And yeah, I completely agree with you, Kevin. I think if we cut him, trade him, are we going to be able to replace him with a like for like talent that would actually save you any money? I don't, given what wide receiver normally gets in free agency, most teams will overpay the wide receivers. We'll end up paying someone just as good, if not worse than Pittman, the same money. And I just think if we can get him restructured, definitely we need to lower the cap hit. I think everyone knows that. So if we can get him restructured, I think it makes the most sense to have him back. Let's say that we go into next season, we got to sign Alec Pierce. Obviously, you guys said that. And we go with him as wide receiver 1, the team start doubling him. If we don't have a solid wide receiver 2 opposite Alec Pierce, are we then in an issue where Pierce isn't as productive throughout the season? So I
think it's a great point, Sam. I'll just add one quick thing here. I guess 2 quick items. First off, Pittman has been very durable throughout his career as well, so I don't want to lose sight of that. 2, I'll go back to what I said kind of to answer the initial question. Pierce has the coveted trait. Pierce has the desired trait. Pittman has more replaceable attributes. I like Pittman. Sam, I love the brawler. I mean, that is a great description for him. I've always said, I don't know how familiar you guys are with our college football world, but USC, where he went, is known as a lot of pretty boys, the Southern California, the pretty cheerleaders, et cetera, et cetera. I've always said Pittman has no USC pretty boy in him. He is a tough mother, what. I mean, that's exactly what he is. But as a wideout, it's easier to find what you would be losing in him than it is Pierce. And he's also 3 or 4 years younger. So,
Yeah, one thing here we can't afford to let Pierce hit the open market. I mean, we fans tend to forget it takes two to tangle. So if I'm Pierce and I get a chance to play with Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, maybe I'll take it. I will take it. I mean, he praised Daniel Jones, but nobody knows how Daniel Jones' health will be come September. So yeah, we can't afford to lose Pierce, to be honest.
No. Yeah, I mean the Packers, the Niners, they'd be very interested, I'd imagine, in
Well,
an
I think half of the league will be after him with his trades. Like, yeah, just can't lose him.
No.
Cannot agree more on that.
Now, you just mentioned him over Daniel Jones. What do we think that contract looks like? Because I must admit, I'm a little nervous about what that's going to end up being.
Yeah, first off, I think it's super unique that Colts have been so public and, their mutual desire to not only bring him back, but, bring him back, it sounds like on a long-term deal. You don't typically see that in the contractual negotiation game here. I get what they're saying. I do think there's a real mutual interest from both parties. First off, let's give the Colts credit. They helped resurrect Daniel Jones's career. I think the Shane Steichen relationship is real. I think the speed of Indianapolis fits him a little bit more than the hustle and the bustle of New York City. So I think that is something that is positive for Jones. But, having said that, I'm pretty sure Minnesota offered more than Indy did this time last offseason. And he obviously looked at the two situations, realized Anthony Richardson was on a much shorter leash than JJ McCarthy, and I get why he would want to come here. So, if you're going to franchise tag Pierce, that means you will have to compete on whatever that open market looks like for Jones. Now, again, I fully expect and think that he will be back, but, Sam, I am curious exactly what that looks like. The franchise tag is, much more in the, upper $40 million range. Is that where you start for the guarantee? Are we looking a little bit more Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold comp? Again, is this where Carly Gordon tries to step in a little bit here and says, hey, wait a minute, 3 to 4 years, no thank you. What about, can we start at 2? Can we kind of go there from that aspect to it? Because the unfortunate nature to Jones is just, even going back to Duke, I mean, he's got injury history that cannot be ignored, and serious, injury history as well, which is just the unfortunate nature, to his career so far. So I don't think franchise tag there. If the Achilles were to linger into 2025, I don't really understand the 1 year, whatever it is, $46 million guarantee. And then again, what if he's not his normal self until November or December? So I'm probably in that 2 to 3 year range, Sam. 35-ish is probably the number I keep on coming back to. But again, the guarantee will be interesting, hovering right around 50, I assume, on that. And then as far as his return, to me, I've said this on my podcast quite often, the two big Daniel Jones questions for me are not necessarily, yes, I'm curious what the contract looks like, but it's when does he get clear for game action, and when does he start looking like the Daniel Jones we saw in September and October? Because as soon as that fibula injury developed, he was not a $40 million quarterback.
Yeah.
So we know Achilles injuries. This franchise has experienced a good amount of them. And you see guys, Samson Ebicom this past season is probably an example of that. And that Achilles was back in July. When you have those injuries, many people say, yeah, you might be cleared in a 12-month window, but you're not your normal self until, potentially longer. And the movement for Daniel Jones is so vital. The only win the Colts had in the last 2 months of the season, I mean, you guys, several of you guys, if not all of you, saw it firsthand. You saw Daniel Jones making plays with his legs in Berlin. That is a big, big part to this offense. Look at Tyler Warren's numbers. I want to say the 7 best receiving numbers for Warren this season occurred in the first 10 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
You look at, as much as you look at Jonathan Taylor's, dip in the final 2 months, look at Tyler Warren's numbers. I mean, it was wild to see how little his production was And again, I think Jones's inability to move and bootleg it and all that stuff played into it. So I think those are a couple of Jones questions as well.
Yeah, I think for me, it's when Jones had to be pretty much under center the whole time, obviously because of the lack of mobility. I think it made a huge difference. We looked so much better run game, everything when he wasn't in the shotgun, when he was actually under center taking the snap from the center. We looked a lot better team than when we're the shotgun runs. I think I speak for everyone where I just get fed up of that inside zone shotgun run on 3rd and short that just goes absolutely nowhere.
Right.
But when you said yes, we can probably assume Daniel Jones is not game ready in September. What does it mean for our quarterback room? I mean, I think a lot of Colts fans expect Anthony Richardson to leave with this free agency. Will we run into the season with Riley Leonard, or what's your point of view?
Yeah, so let's start with Richardson. Again, the vision thing is really real. It's obviously an awful injury. It's a freak accident, but you feel terrible for him of the orbital fracture. All of a sudden the trauma goes up in the eye. We're talking retina issues. We're talking vision issues. Struggled, frankly, at practice late in the season and doing a lot of stuff just kind of around him, catching snaps, at the bottom of his feet, kind of that little yard 2 radius right around him, which is so critical for a quarterback operating in a, very, crowded pocket. So that would be the first question. The 10.8 million, I believe, is the 4th-year cap hit for him. And that's a big number, when you look at how you would view him here. So I just assume that will be a trade, and then how good of a pick can you get? I probably should be a little realistic in that. Is it a 4th? Is it a 5th? What does that look like for him? So it just seems like as much as the marriage of Daniel Jones and the Colts is mutual and is going to continue, it just seems like the marriage of Richardson and the Colts seems to be cracking and probably is best served for both parties, particularly the Richardson party elsewhere. I think Riley Leonard has earned the right, Andres, to be next man up, if you will. Now, I think they believe Daniel Jones will start week 1, to be totally honest with you. Now, I know it's not a slam dunk, and me saying that on January 20th is a little premature, but, we watched that Houston defense in the playoffs. That thing is no joke. And the thing about Leonard in week 17 or week 18, and again, is a small sample size, but to me, he performed very well in that game in the area that I think is his biggest question mark, and that is consistently delivering from the pocket. And that, to me, I think is a really strong point to continue to build on in his offseason. So, I view Leonard as a guy that, can certainly be a backup moving forward. Financially, he's making 10 times less than Richardson. So that is probably something that you can't overlook as well. Do they go out and get another? Maybe somebody, but, again, if you're going to do that of substance, where is all this coming from?
That would be my follow-up question, actually. Do you see us drafting in 3rd and 4th one of these fallen stars, college stars like Klapnik or Nassmeyer, when they fall really that deep? Do you see us grab one of them in 3rd or 4th round?
I would certainly not be opposed to it. I think it's a great question. But this kind of gets back, I guess, into what Sam was saying earlier of like, how much is the GM's thinking here? Yeah. Hey, I got to be as all in on 2026 as I can be. If you had a first-year GM, I would say that is definitely on the table. I would say, yeah, the Colts could easily draft a quarterback. I've come around on my thinking with quarterback over the years. I would draft one every year. Now, I'm not drafting them in the 1st or 2nd round, but like throw darts at a board. I draft Riley Leonard, every year in round 6, and who knows, maybe my 5th time, that dude turns out to be whatever, and if your 6th round or 7th round pick becomes your backup, that's a win. That's a great win. So, yes, I think it's a great point. But again, without the first rounder, and how much else are you netting back? If you traded Richardson for a fourth, then maybe, you just kind of view that and say, hey, let's go ahead and spend that fourth. But I think, again, sample size very small with Leonard, but I think with what he showed, I think he's earned the right to kind of be whatever, next man up for now. And if it's going to, let's say Jones has a setback and isn't ready till October 1st, can you go 2-2 with Riley Leonard? Depending the schedule, I don't think that's the craziest thought in the world. So that's probably how I would view quarterback.
By the way, Lucas, I think you met in Indy. He thanked you for your kindness.
Yeah,
He
Lucas.
sent greetings.
Yeah. He came in and shout out our radio station. Great human, and I know certainly part of the strong European Colts contingent we have.
So
you mentioned. Oh, go on. Sorry, you go, Andres.
okay, so just Marcel was asking basically the same we just talked about. It's Marcel. The Colts assume that Daniel Jones will be back. Otherwise, it's probably Riley Leonard. So, yeah.
Well, and again, I think this gets into the debate, guys, of when is Jones back and when is he back looking like Daniel Jones?
Yeah.
He can't have the movement of Phillip Rivers
because
then you are getting mediocre quarterback play. So, and I think this is where it could really complicate things. Like, let's play out this scenario for a second. Marcel said, week 5? Let's say Riley Leonard gets the first 4 starts and he goes 1-3. Then Daniel Jones comes back, takes him a month to knock off the rust. Let's say he goes 2-2. So now you're 3-5. Let's say then Jones plays the final 9 games of the season. He goes 6-3. Starts to look, better. That's a 9-8 season. You missed the playoffs by 1 game.
That sounds like a Chris Ballard season.
What are you doing? I mean, because that's a little different than this past year. This is the arrows pointing a little bit more up, late in the season. And I think that's where I've started to get my mind into the 2026 season a little bit here. And I'm like, oh boy, it might look the reverse. Because I felt this way about the current season, we just witnessed. If the year was more balanced, 8-2, whatever it was, to 0-7. If it was 6-4, let's play out these 50-50 games. Let's say the Colts lose to Denver and lose to Arizona, but then they beat Kansas City and they beat Seattle. The balance of the nature, not as much as this massive roller coaster. If it was just a little bit more 6-4, 4-6, something like that, would that have influenced Carly at all? Do you make the Sauce Gardner trade if you're 6-4? These are all hypotheticals I've thought about. Probably stupid, to be honest with you, but welcome to the offseason here. But to Marcel's point, again, if it takes Jones a little bit of time and then all of a sudden November, December, he starts to look better, does that change your thinking here, moving into 2027? As Sam says, it sounds like a Chris Ballard season. It certainly does. But, one thing I think we've learned here is the Irsay family, they love Chris Ballard, and they probably love him even more than I thought that they loved him, to be honest with you. I mean, I always felt like that leash was long, but I think it's a little longer than I even initially thought.
Do you think there's a world where they give Ballard a 1-year extension this offseason?
Yeah, I was glad that I think it was James Boyd asked, about the extension in the press conference. I know some people were kind of like, why would you ask? But, we don't see people typically go into contract years in this, field. I can't, I guess. I shouldn't say I can't, because every time I've said that, seemingly the odds are, I get thrown back in my face. But I don't really see the benefit, not to play the college football example, but it's fresh in my mind. Sometimes with college football coaches, the coach will always have at least a 4-year contract because teams would try to recruit against that.
Mm-hmm.
If you are, let's just use Indiana and Purdue are 2 colleges here. And if you're, Ulrich and you are down to those 2 schools and I'm the Indiana coach and, Andres is the Purdue coach and I know he only has 3 years left on his deal or 2 years left and I got 5, I'm saying to you, I'm going to be here while you're on campus.
Mm-hmm.
He might not be. To me, who cares about the GM? Like, I mean, I don't think guys are making free agency decisions necessarily off of that. I get that you could be cut, in a blink of an eye, and a new regime would probably have some roster upheaval, but there, obviously you're still going to get some of that contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to see it. I guess it's kind of to your point about, we don't know where Jones is going to be truly able to play like Daniel Jones can. So if that be week 5, week 7, and we're looking at, again, you're kind of starting off a season 1-4, 2-3, if you're gonna pay Daniel Jones a lot of money for a coach who seems very set on Daniel Jones, or at least Daniel Jones' style of quarterback play, to then get to the end of next year and it be another 9-8 season, and then it's like, well, is there regime change then? Can we actually do regime change? We've kind of tied ourselves to Daniel Jones. We've put ourselves in a bit of a weird situation. I think you mentioned as well how public we've been kind of over how Daniel Jones is the guy. It does seem like a strange way that we're approaching negotiations for what's turning out to be probably almost a more expensive contract than if he hadn't hurt his Achilles.
Yeah, I know. If I were his agent, there would be a lot of ammo you would have on your side here. Now, again, what does the market look like? Teams are naturally going to be hesitant around the league for a guy coming off a torn Achilles, but teams are also desperate for quarterback. And look at Minnesota. I don't know if you guys caught their GM answering the question about J.J. McCarthy, but man, he was asked about J.J. McCarthy starting in 2026, and he wanted no part of that question whatsoever. So I still believe Jones and Pierce will be. I'm not ready for the if Daniel Jones signs elsewhere conversation on who starts a quarterback because, I've already had one hair transplant. I'm afraid I would have to have another.
Changing it up from Daniel Jones, Jim Bob Cooter possibly heading to the Philadelphia Eagles. Who do we think would replace him? I mean, talk of Philip Rivers, maybe as an
Uncle Phil.
I know. I have that is a thought that's crossed my mind. They've had so much offensive staff continuity, under Shane. Cam Turner, for example, a quarterback's coach. Alex Tanney is an in-house name that I know they're really high on. The passing game, I forget his exact title, passing game specialist or something along those lines. That would be my assumption. Again, the OC job, it's not as, I think, pressing here because Shane obviously is calling the plays. And, if you look at the cycle right now, what did we ended up having 10 openings? I mean, you guys are seeing this. I mean, you got teams interviewing 12, 13, 14 guys. I mean, tons of candidates, and Jim Bob Cooter's name isn't popping up anywhere. And you would think if you are a coordinator on a unit that put up historic numbers for at least a chunk of the season, Matthew Stafford has always spoken very highly of him. Peyton Manning has spoken highly of him. You would think that would merit some, interview, but I get why teams are hesitant. And, Sirianni is an example of a guy that it worked out. Now he tried to do the play calling initially in Philly. It didn't work. And then he gave it to Shane and the rest is history. So, I would assume Tanney. I don't know. Maybe I'm overlooking Cam Turner, the quarterback's coach, but, and again, maybe there's somebody around the league, would he go out and try and get Kevin Patullo, who, just got fired in Philly? I don't necessarily know, but I'm not expecting a ton of roster, or I should say staff turnover.
Do you see any possibility getting offense coordinator who's going to call the plays actually? So Shane Steichen gives that to his offensive coordinator? Because, I mean, we all saw during the game there are issues with Shane Steichen and the play calling. Do you see any point he actually will give that up, or is it just not possible?
Yeah, I don't see him giving that up at all. It's a fair question, but given Shane's makeup, I think what makes him an attractive head coach is his offensive acumen, is his play calling. So stripping that from him, maybe that would improve his CEO tactics, but you would be betting on that. I don't necessarily view that. He's got to grow in that area, to be clear. But again, I think for this current iteration of the team, especially with Daniel Jones, I think him calling plays, overseeing the offense is the best way to go. But, again, I don't want, just because I'm saying that doesn't mean I'm overlooking his head coach hat, because I do think that's lacking. 2-10 against Houston and Jacksonville. Why? 7-22 against teams above 500. Why? Ultimately the defensive side of the ball is under his watch. He is the head coach of the football team. Like, I get that he allows Gus Bradley and Lou Anarumo to do their thing, but that is your unit. And again, to bring up last night's national championship game, there was a wonderful sequence late in the game that I'll lay out for you guys, because I know full well you were deep into some REM sleep at that point. Miami's driving for the potential game winner. And, in college football, the clock stops after first downs at that point of the game. And Indiana's got one timeout left. Miami has none. And Miami's starting to move it. And they cross midfield, about a minute to play. And Indiana decides to burn their last timeout after Miami had run probably 3 straight plays. And I was fascinated by that, because my thought is, and you see this in the NFL a lot, if you let that team score, or they do score, 30 seconds and one timeout's a whole lot different than 30 seconds and no timeouts. And so basically what Curt Cignetti, who is a CEO coach, he does not call offensive or defensive plays, he said at that point, I'm almost surrendering the white flag when we get the ball offensively. We have got to get this stop right here, right now. And we need to regroup defensively. And I think some of the thought there is, you want your pass rush to be able to rest. Maybe you want your defensive backs to regroup a little bit there. And the next play after the timeout, they pick off Carson Beck. And again, I could see people going both ways on that.
Yeah.
But this is the CEO element. And the NFL has so many more of those moments where it comes down to, go back to that Seattle game, Colts Seahawks from earlier this year. That was a masterclass by Mike McDonald in taking timeouts to preserve time for them to get into that final field goal range. So, those are some of the things with Shane of, like, if you're going to call the plays offensively, to me, that means you better have some sort of person in the booth where you just listen to them and they just tell you what to do. They're saying, time out here, time out there, do this, like, they're your clock manager. And I know Shane's got that, but still, that to me is a must. But yeah, I would, if I were starting an NFL franchise, I'd probably CEO it up at head coach. I just think there's so much involved that would be the route I would take. But again, I mean, look at our playoffs right now. Sean McVay still left, and what does he do? He does it all. I'm trying to think. I guess AFC, Sean Payton calls plays, right? So, you have two of the 4, do all of that. So I get it's kind of a mixed bag, but yeah, given Shane, I just, if you took that from him, I'd almost say, why is he the head coach? That's probably how I view it.
Yeah, I think Andreas is shaking his head, thinking, why is he the head coach?
I'm going to say that anyway. So,
well, again, that opens up a whole different can here. So, that is a very, very fair point here. And, another thing we haven't really talked about, which I think is just the reality of the Colts right now, guys, is it's awkward given the difference in when they were hired. 2017 versus 2023 is light years. 6-year difference in the NFL from when one GM was hired versus the head coach. I mean, that's a huge, huge difference. So, yeah, are they tight at the hip? When Carly Ursay-Gordon was asked that in her press conference, she said, "We'll find out on this day next year." So you kind of needed some intense music after she said that answer, I felt like.
Yeah, it very much felt like, without saying it's playoffs or bust, it was it's
Right.
playoffs or bust, sort of. I mean, it looks like we've dodged a bullet with Lou, I guess. So I don't think he's interviewing for any other jobs at the moment.
Yeah,
interviewing for a field now.
Right, with Tennessee filling last night with the Robert Saleh news there. Yeah, I don't believe. And again, he gets to run that whole operation, so it's not like Jim Bob Cooter would have a reason to leave, whereas with Lou, it's not like he has somebody above him. So, this is where we started getting the offseason guys. At this point last year, Gus had been fired, Lou had been hired, and we knew Chris wanted to spend differently in free agency. We sit here right now. We don't expect staff changes, at least nothing that they want to do. And when it comes to the free agency money, it's a little bit more of how are they going to make it all work? Yes, they do want to do some things defensively. And I've kind of come around on this. They need to go out and they need to find a starter opposite Latu. They need to find a new starting linebacker. And then I think if they can make it work, I'd like to see one other notable front seven addition defensively. Now, safety with the Nick Cross situation will be interesting. If he walks in free agency, safety skyrockets up the needs list. But that's kind of how I view the offseason right now. And again, how do you do that? Do you find Do you find the starting defensive end in free agency? Do you come back in the draft? Ballard has drafted linebackers exceptionally well. Do you draft a linebacker in round 2? You plug him in and you hope and pray, whatever, he's the next Darius Leonard. And then where does that other, notable front seven addition come from? And I can get talked into a lot of other areas for that. Defensive tackle, you're a little older. Defensive end could probably use another body as well, with 3 of them in free agency: Kwity Paye, Tyquan Lewis, and Samson Ebukam. And, again, linebacker, as much as Louis Anarumo doesn't want to play a lot of them, it could probably use a little bit more there. So that's kind of how I view the offseason right now.
Do you think Zaire Franklin's a potential cut trade candidate?
Yeah, I mean, the 3 I come back to, Sam, are Pittman, Franklin, and Kenny Moore.
Yeah.
Those are the 3, given their age, given their contracts, given the level of play, some combination of that. But I also don't want to act – Zaire walking the door would be a loss. And look at the depth chart. This is not, to me, Jalen Travis at right tackle, I see Braden Smith passing that torch to him and him taking over. I don't see that body at linebacker. Is it Jalen Carlisle? I mean, he just went through an entire NFL season and he played 2 defensive snaps. So I can't say that. And again, how much does Lou want to play the young guys? That's the other thing that I keep on coming back to is here. Every time this past season he had a chance to play the young guys, it seems like he opted for the old guys.
Yeah.
Particularly some of his own. Joe Bacci at linebacker, Xavier Howard at corner. Where's Justin Wally from the torn ACL? If Mooney Ward retires, boy,
he should. Actually, he should.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yes. If you want to go down that path, I wholeheartedly agree. He's for his own health, and he's accomplished. He's had a wonderful NFL career, financially, individually, team success, all of it. So, those are the 3, though, Sam. I would probably, do you keep Zaire, let Jermaine Pratt walk in free agency? Or do you do the reverse? Do you bring Pratt back? He's probably a little cheaper. Do you let Franklin walk? I mean, again, letting Franklin walk, I get that he's not a perfect linebacker, but, he's played pretty much every snap for you for the last, 3 or 4 years as a starter. So, do you feel like you can find that instant impact? One thing they're going to need in this draft is, again, I apologize for the continued IU football analogies here, but, a big mantra to Curt Cignetti has been, we want production over potential. Now, the draft is often thought of as you try to marry the 2. And I'd argue Chris Ballard has probably been more potential over production.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it can work. Nick Cross, I think, is an example of that. You were banking on a lot of traits. He was very young. He eventually got there. But you go back to that 2022 draft class, the draft class right now turned out to be a pretty good draft class. Pierce, Bernard Ryman, Nick Cross, second and third rounders. Now, Jelani Woods was thrown in there. But if you go back to their rookie years, we wouldn't have said that about Pierce. We wouldn't have said that about Ryman. We wouldn't have said that about Cross. So can you find that type of draft class, but can you find it right away?
Yeah.
It's a lofty goal. And again, do you go more production versus potential? Is the RAS score, the relative athletic score we talk about in the draft so much, is that not, just branded across Chris Ballard's forehead as he enters the draft? I think those are very real conversations you have to have.
Yeah, and Ballard's always been a freaky athlete kind of drafter, right? And then we'll coach them up. Whereas, I think what we've already spoke about, him being on a year where it's win now, it's win at all costs. Effectively, you might need to get some more kind of league ready players, as opposed to maybe in 2 years' time they could be a Nick Cross, they could be an Alec Pierce. But yeah, I mean, you kind of beat me to the point about if Mooney Ward retires. I see cornerback as, I think defensive end is still priority number one for me. I think we've just had no pass rush for what's felt like years and years now. So someone opposite Latu is a must. But then if Ward goes, I feel like cornerback is, Justin Wally, by all accounts, training camp, it sounded like he was having a great training camp and was potentially going to be a starter week one. So maybe he's a starter. But outside of that, you got Jalen Jones, who towards the end of the season, it didn't look like he could get on the field. Mekhi Blackman, for me, didn't really look like it certainly didn't look like a starting cornerback. Maybe he can be a depth guy, but
right.
Yeah, we'll be light at cornerback, especially with Kenny. Love Kenny, but it kind of feels like that might have been his last season in Indy.
Yeah, I don't think I'm there just yet. Again, Pittman, Franklin, Kenny, I can listen to all these discussions, but I don't think I'm there. And you just kind of laid it out, when you start to go through the depth chart. And, again, Justin Wally is coming off a torn ACL. I get the ACL has been much more, not as a death sentence-y as some other injuries, or certainly 20, 30 years ago. But, corner and safety are the two that right now are not atop the list, but that can change in a hurry. If you want to, Nick Cross for a second here, do you have the space to pay two safeties that type of money? You've already paid Cam Bynum pretty good money. Now, having said that, what's your depth chart at safety? I cover the team on a daily basis. If you told me to name the safeties on the Colts this season, I'd struggle to name them all. The other safeties, Rodney Thomas II, Trey Washington is an undrafted free agent. Hunter Wohler is coming off a serious Liz Frank injury, so that's one where I always say is you can't commit a first round pick to every position group. Yeah. And that's why you look at O-line, and this is a major credit to Chris Ballard, whether it's Tanner Bortolini for Ryan Kelly, whether it's Matt Gonzalez for Will Fries, and we'll see about Jalen Travis for Braden Smith. He's done a very nice job in passing the torch. It took a little while at left tackle, but he's done a really nice job in passing the torch at many of those positions. And that, again, that's not easy with a lot of middle round picks too. So, but corner and safety, to get back to that, Sam, and how committed are you to younger and faster? Younger and faster is, does that mean that like the ages of Franklin and Kenny Moore get talked about here? But you got a coordinator that seemingly he never really wanted to do that thing in Cincinnati. Play younger, that is.
Yeah.
So that's where, to me, at this point in the offseason last year, I had a pretty good idea of what it was going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
We knew the scheme was changing. We knew the secondary was going to get some sort of attention. And I believe Chris Ballard then that he would change his ways. And he did. Right here, right now, I don't have a great picture of what this offseason will look like. I assume Pearson Jones, but then after that, oh boy, it's a good thing we like beer.
We had Marcel here. I think he missed the part we're talking about the line. So yeah, Marcel, we already had it. We need someone on the opposite of Latu. But when we talk about the opposite of Latu, it came to my mind. How do you feel about JTT? I mean, he barely saw the field to the most of the season in the last 2 or 3 games. He saw got a little bit of playtime. How do you feel about him?
I wanted a little bit more out of him because he actually is probably one of the few more production than potential in college. Again, for those that don't follow the college game super well, he played at Ohio State, probably the gold standard of college football over the last 5 to 10 years in our country. And they just wrapped up a playoff run last year where he was tremendous against Notre Dame, against Texas, against Oregon. I mean, Tennessee, big time programs. So that's where I would have liked to have seen more. And, he always felt like he was below Pay, Lewis, Ebicom, in that pecking order. And I think you'd like to have, especially late in the season, like to have seen him, kind of penetrate that a little bit higher. So, to go back to Marcel's point, no question in my mind, it's got to be defensive end. Even if all these other things that we talked about, even if Pittman somehow is gone, even if Kenny Moore is sometimes gone, it's pass rush, guys. It is. I mean, it's pass rush. I go back to that first playoff game, Carolina and LA, last Saturday, a week ago Saturday, and you watch the end of that game and what the Rams did when they got the lead to slam the door shut. And it's not like they sacked Bryce Young on every play, but they got him out of the pocket and they hit him. And it's just what consistent pressure can do is just, it's everything. It matters more than tight coverage. The reason why Miami was in that game late last night against Indiana was Indiana really struggled to create pass rush. Carson Beck, it's not like he was slicing and dicing it 3 seconds into a play. No, he was trying to keep some things alive here. So, yeah. And again, what does that look like? Trey Hendrickson, well, that's not younger. And that's, I mean, look at the injuries. Finding an instant impact pass rusher in round 2. I mean, good luck finding that on Chris Ballard's resume. I mean, that's a ludicrous thought. So how they go about it is where I keep on struggling. But without a question for me, pass rush. You've got to get life in there. I think the numbers actually played out as the season moved along. I think they were 26th in sacks per pass attempt, which I think is an accurate depiction of what I felt about that pass rush. So yes, you just got to. Yes. Amen. Cheers to that.
Yeah, it's Trey Hendrickson for me. I don't know how you guys feel. It's a no for me. I think obviously you mentioned Kevin. That's not younger. It's not faster. And I mean, that's going to be a lot of money, right? He's going to want 30 million plus, I presume, for a guy who's very injury prone right now, coming towards the end of his career. It would be a hard pass for me on him. How much sway Lou has in that conversation? Obviously, we've got Jermaine Pratt. Does he have the ear of Carly and Ballard and say that it's got to be Hendrickson? I don't know.
If we would not have picked up Sauce Gardner and instead going for Hendrickson, I would have understand this one. But right now, getting Hendrickson doesn't make sense for me.
Yeah, and was it a hip? Was that what it was this year?
Yeah, it was.
When you get a little older, and we're starting to talk about that, and Buckner's been so bulletproof throughout his career, and now we're talking about a neck with him, and again, I'm not expecting him to retire, to be clear, but still, I mean, first it was a back, and that's kind of lingered, and now it's a neck. I mean, it's just I understand where Ballard's coming from, and like we have to get younger and faster. Like I nodded my head internally when he kept on repeating that throughout the press conference. Now, there was a bird on the other shoulder that thought, wait, isn't this your defensive unit that you have built? Like, you know, he's the guy cleaning up his own mess, which I'd love if my kids did that, but I don't know if I love for the, GM to be doing that in year 10, but here we are.
Yeah.
I want to talk with you guys. We just talked a little bit about Saleh for the Titans. Saleh and Mike McDaniels for the Titans. I don't like that move. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, I have. Is the Mike McDaniel thing official? I haven't seen that yet, or is that the rumor? Yeah. Obviously when you hire the defensive head coach and you've got the young quarterback, what does that coordinator look like? The offensive coordinator, that is. So, I thought Cam Ward, there's a little bit more there than maybe the numbers indicated. And yeah, I don't look at that hire and think they'll continue to be the runt of the AFC South like they have been in recent years. So yeah, has this division gotten a little bit better? Even if you don't think Tennessee is going to be whatever, Jacksonville doesn't look like they're going to be. Jacksonville did everything this season, and Travis Hunter, was nowhere to be found over the final couple months of the season. So, that's another aspect to it. So, Houston, obviously, where is CJ Stroud out, entering next year as well, I think is a big, big thing.
Yeah, I imagine he's about to get paid a lot of money, and that may not end up being the best thing for that franchise in the future.
Right.
Another reason we need a pass rush, because we saw what he turned into when there's pressure in his face.
Right, and I'm trying to think next year off the top of my head, what is it? Is it AFC North and NFC East? Are those the opponents?
Definitely NFC East.
NFC North, yeah, and East.
I'm pretty sure it's AFC North and NFC East. So, that's Burrow, that's Jackson.
Jackson.
That's Hurts, that's Dak, that's Jaden Daniels, Jackson Dart. The schedule, you can talk yourself into a hard or easy NFL schedule every year, but again, it's not falling out of bed and going 11-6 by any means. And what does the start of the year look like? And this is kind of a year next year. You would probably love to have a schedule that you had this year, very backloaded, given Daniel Jones' status, which I know is weird to say because his team has struggled so much late in the season. And again, that's probably the last thing, because I do have to run here in about 5 minutes. That's probably the last thing I'll add is just on the Ballard front, these late season collapses. It's not just under Steichen's watch.
No.
How much of that is culture? How much of that is the core? A lot of these guys have been here for multiple of those collapses late season. If you look at the 5-year playoff drought, you could make the case every one of them had one of them. It's not like they've had like Miami, for example, they did the reverse this year. They played better at the end of the season. The Colts really haven't had that in these 5 years. 21, you had the big time final couple weeks of the season. 22, chalk it up to Jeff Saturday. 23 was probably the best year, or at least, the biggest surprise, but still you had a week 18 game in your own building and you couldn't get it done. And then obviously, you lose to Taylor Heineke and Jake Browning one year. And then, this season obviously speaks for itself. And, I definitely get there were injuries. That's proper context to point that out. But, Daniel Jones's career has been that. And as great as bad as the injury situation was, Jonathan Taylor wasn't on the injury report for one day last year. Your pass catchers were very, very healthy. Your O-line was super healthy through 3 months. When you play the Chargers early in the season, they were on their 4th and 5th offensive tackle. So I can't chalk it all up to the injuries will flip, snap your fingers, and the football gods will say the Colts deserve one this year.
I think you mentioned the culture. I think you could argue that's leaked into Shane as well. Just kind of end game collapses. This season there was, the Broncos game. We got lucky. Shane settled for a 60-yarder for a guy who'd never kicked one, and we got lucky with a penalty. And then the Chiefs game, that was in the bag, and we kind of got really ultra conservative, lost that one. Seahawks, I think you could argue there'll be some aggressive coaches that would have gone for that fourth down to win the game effectively.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could argue that culture's kind of leaked into the team and Shane's kind of coaching.
Yeah, and I get culture can be really buzzwordy and a lot of gray area. It's hard to define. If you win, you got good culture. If you lose, you don't. I understand a lot of people kind of come back to those points, but right now for me, I see a level of acceptance in mediocrity organizationally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, who's to blame for that? Do you go all the way up to ownership? Is it more of the GM? Is it more of the coach? Is it more of a core that, again, has largely been the same? But, 5 years is a long time in the NFL. And there's only 2 teams that have a longer current playoff drought. So, those are all, I think, very, very real conversations, even if they internally don't want to have them and or aren't ready to make changes with the powers that be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's some good words to wrap it up for today. Kevin, thank you very much for being with us again. It's always a pleasure to have you here. You're always welcome.
Okay.
You bet, and I certainly owe, as much as I owe you guys another appearance with a beer, I owe it to myself. So hopefully later in 2026, maybe when we have some off-season stuff to talk about, I can hop back on.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, thanks for coming on, Kevin. Great to have you.
See you guys.
Cheers.
Thanks everybody for listening, and see you. We will slow down our shows in the next few weeks and months. We actually plan to come back after the Super Bowl. So yeah, see you guys.
Cheers, guys. Go Colts. Cheers, Ulrich.